In this video, I will go over the definition of combat sports, fighting skills, and martial ways with you. I will talk about Ramses and how he has martial arts titles. I will talk about West African grappling, which is meant to throw the enemy on the ground and not wrestle on the ground like a snake, and how that is similar to a hawk fighting someone. Sorry for the noise, but I'm out here in Santa Cruz by the beach trying to calm down to, be tactical. A situation where my parents try to keep me at home and then drug me up when I'm angry because I'm at home in the middle of nowhere. So it's basically a prison-like situation. So it's similar to what these martial artists have gone through. I'm feeling pretty calm, pretty good. It's a sunny day. Beautiful women I can't have coming by, and also regular women as well. So we'll start with Ramses, shall we? Because that's the first picture on the screen. We'll try to limit this to 3 minutes. Ramses II, variously translated as Ramses, born 1303 BC. That's important, 13 and a 3. Died July or August 1213 BC. He reigned from 1279 to 1213 BC. Also known as Ramses the Great, was the third pharaoh of the 19th dynasty of Egypt. He often is regarded as the great, most celebrated, and most powerful pharaoh of the Egyptian Empire. His successors and later Egyptians called him the Great Ancestor. Ramses II led several military expeditions into the Levant, reasserting Egyptian control over Canaan, which means reproduction, food, you name it, slaves, you name it, human resources, land. He also led expeditions to the south into Nubia, commemorated in inscriptions at Bet al-Wali and Gerf Hussein. At age 14, Ramses was appointed Prince Regent by his father, Seti I. He is believed to have taken the throne in his late teens and is known to have ruled Egypt from 1279 to 1213 BC. Manetho attributes Ramses II a reign of 66 years and 2 months. Most Egyptologists today believe he assumed the throne on May 31st, 1279 BC, based on his known ascension date of 3 Shamu Day 27. Estimates of his age at death vary. 90 or 91 is considered most likely. Ramses II celebrated an unprecedented 14 said festivals, the first held after 30 years of Pharaoh's reign and then every 3 years. During his reign, more than any other pharaoh, on his death, he was buried in a tomb in the Valley of the Kings. His body was later moved to a royal cache where it was discovered in 1881 and is now on display in the Cairo Museum. The early part of his reign was focused on building cities, temples, and monuments. He established the city of P. Ramses in the Nile Delta as his new capital and used it as the main base for his campaigns in Syria. He also is known as Ozymandias in the Greek sources, from a transliteration into Greek of a part of Ramses' throne name, User Maatra, the Mayat, right? Sete Penra, or Penre, the justice of Re, is powerful, chosen of Re. So he's the chosen bloodline from the top martial artist. And I'll prove that. Remember, that's the mainstream narrative. So let's start in order, shall we? I'm a little bit behind schedule. I apologize. We'll go to page 8. Wish I had my pen here. I can make a note. I'll just grab a pen. Sorry for the noise. Oh. All right. So page 8. Sorry for the background noise. I'll try to minimize for the rest of the video. All right. On page 8, we see war dances on the third paragraph, the last paragraph. Okay, it talks about war dances. Since I'm behind schedule, I'm going to skip over to something I find a little bit more interesting at this point. And I'm eager to talk about the different definitions of things. So, this is about 4:15. And here we go. Combat sports, fighting skills, and martial ways. Alright. So combat sports or combat games are those forms of simulated combat that have as their objective to win in a contest with a fixed set of rules. Contemporary examples of combat sports include Olympic Taekwondo, Olympic wrestling, boxing, and sports fencing. Many unarmed African wrestling styles fall primarily under the genre of combat sport, though this can vary depending on the context. So in our context, right, as martial artists, we're putting the emphasis on our religious systems, Egypt, Igbo, and most African Americans are Igbos. That's part of our martial arts tradition, or they're mixed with Igbos at least, if you get my point, descending from. Fighting skills can be loosely defined as those combat systems that prioritize the killing of it or incapacitating of an opponent by any means available in a real combat situation. Western examples could include the U.S. Marine Special Forces unarmed combat system. African examples could include Zulu spear and shield work. So it's interesting how I made this example without ever referring to this part of the book, though in the back of my head I'm sure it was there. In this way, I think I've referred to it in one or two videos, but not in this manner. They bring up the Zulu spear and shield, right? I am a Zulu warrior, not a combat sports artist. So I'm going to give a special emphasis to this part because I feel that a lot of the misunderstanding comes from the definitions, and that is part of what Babylon does. They want you to confuse the sports guy and the actor and people who have gone different ways with it, which we'll get into in a second, with the actual fighting skills, which are transferable skills. So it's unarmed combat system, transferable skills are Zulu spear and shield work. For example, would you jog to get good at Zulu spear and shield work for the same way you would do it to get good at unarmed combat systems? These are transferable skills: dexterity, timing, speed, calculating distance, precision, agility, technique, strategy, the ability to make contact to varying degrees, a light contact, rare touch, or deep penetrating contact. So yes, light contact demonstrates, and listen carefully, the ability to strike a person with a varying degree of force and having control over that force to a certain degree. So yes, it does represent how hard you can hit someone to a certain degree, because you have to have control of your chi to a certain degree to maintain it, if you understand my point. And so a lot of these things they don't understand, and you can tell that they have no chance against me by the fact that I have to explain things in layman's terms when the ancestors communicate to me in African terms, which are more complex than these military-industrial complex, complex having people. And if you notice, they put the Marine Special Forces in the same paragraph under fighting skills as the Zulu spear and shield work. And of course, a lot of cops are former military. So you can imagine how that feeds into the psyop, processes and attitudes and so on, and their belief systems, and how the CIA are military intelligence, and how the Masons started the CIA, right? The CIA, the OSS, eugenics, you have Roosevelt, Truman, Galton, look it up. Anyway, I'm falling a little bit behind. I would love to explore this too more. Let's go over martial ways. Martial ways, so fighting skills to me are actual martial arts. Okay, everything else is sports and ways that went with it. That's why it's in the center, it's the core. Martial ways will be defined here as those systems that develop self-defense skills, but in which philosophical and stylistic considerations outweigh the importance of defeating an opponent. That is, this is presentation, that is, they are conceived of as ways of self-perfection through martial technique, discipline, and spiritual code. So, obviously, these things are the core of martial arts as well, the principles behind them. However, it has to do with presentation and your perspective of that presentation. Are you an African who sees the truth? Are you a Roman who lives like a wolf? Are you a snake? Are you a serpent? What is your perspective on the presentation? And what does that say about you? Sorry for that, biker driving by. I'll try to wrap this up soon. The Japanese concept of martial art as Budo or martial way is relatively recent, which, with the 20th century development of karate-do, judo, and aikido. Although perhaps an older Asian example can be found in the case of Chinese Tai Chi Chuan. For those initiated into masterhood, both the Ngolo and Mba fit squarely into this category. Again, Tai Chi Chuan is nowhere near as old as African martial arts, and a lot of people trace it to Buddha, who was from the biggest group of blacks in in Eurasia. One could argue the Indians, right? He's from the same part as the biggest group. Whether he was a dark-skinned Indian or light, he's still from over there. And one can look at it as when the Africans started losing because of technology, the Hamites all over the place started suffering because they could no longer be You're protected because of the white man's treachery and technology. If you get my drift. No offense to anybody, I'm just telling it how it is. I'm part white, if that makes you feel better. For those initiated into masterhood, both the Ngolo and Umba fit squarely into this category. I will use the terms martial arts, martial traditions, combat arts, or combat forms when not distinguishing among these more specifically defined categories. So one must also consider my presentation, as I am more calm because I drove here. I'm getting incrementally cleaning the car, and I'm noticing what caused my car to drive rough, and it's not all mechanical. A lot of it has to do with environment, like dust and grime, in hard to reach places that I incrementally are getting at with the hose. And I tell you this at my own risk, because I love you people more than myself, so they might use that to sabotage me. So here we go. 11. I've read this many times. Let me just shoot through this. Second to last paragraph. Central to all contexts is the concept of honor for the practitioner, and often for the community through the honored practitioner. 11, huh? When we start meshing, either art could central to all contexts is the concept of honor for the practitioner, not for the community through the honored practitioner. Last paragraph. Mastery in either art could bring a skilled practitioner respect for his graceful execution, the admiration of potential wives, and economic advancement. Remember, the Umba rarely touches the ground. The Capoeista doesn't want to touch the ground either. So throw them on the ground so they can get stabbed during combat, rather than wrestle as a sport like they did in Greece. Being underhanded, throwing a softball like a little girl, or being a man and throwing it overhanded. There's different ways you can look at it. And we'll get to the appendix and wait for their apology soon, don't worry. Each art provided a path of spiritual development that could take an exceptional adept to one of the highest forms of honor in Africa, the status of a transcendent hero. Someone who was initiated into full mastery of Ngolo, which is the striking, could become a special kind of ancestor who could physically manifest in the bodies of the descendants. Similarly, the Biafran art of Umba, West African, throw them on the ground, could serve as a tool to achieve the highest of honors. And remember, you need balance to do that. It's kind of like the Asian guys trying to throw each other's balance off, right? Except for they're actually grappling on the ground, which is arguably harder, depending on how you look at it, especially if you go up against a big, strong, athletic black guy instead of, no offense. What was I? Similarly, the Biafran art of Umba and his cognizance could serve as a tool to achieve the highest of honors. A master of the martial art to Umba who remained true to the accompanying moral code, this is key, could become a transcendent hero, the most honored of ancestors, who could be called upon for guidance in the important matters and can reincarnate among the living while retaining a position among the dead ancestors. In this sense, both Ngolo and Umba can be understood as martial arts, and more specifically as martial ways in the strict sense. So after this, read the next paragraph. Pause the screen if you can, but I got to keep going. I think we're going to jump to 162. That was page 12. We ended at about 13, 15. So we're going to jump to 152. Again, it's hard for me to be organized because it's the hectic situation and leaving the temple and everything. I apologize, and I'm trying to make it easier for myself while I'm in public so I don't get in trouble. That's part of maintaining optimum behavior in the face of adversity and provocation. What was that? 162, right. Should have had marked. Yeah. So on page 162, almost out of time. I have to shoot through this. I'm sorry. It says, progressing to the level of leadership was in a strict sense the most selective process, as each group had one publicly acknowledged chief, a respected member who had to be a true master of the martial art. The status of leader was only achieved, according to Philo, by that one whose bravery could not be overcome. So as you can see, they have to be a brave martial artist to be the great one, the chosen one, and that goes back to Ramses. And since I'm almost out of time, I'll put up this last appendix, okay? This is code 1420, the appendix, the Angolo techniques, the handstand, the headstand, the cartwheel. It goes on to talk about the circular kick. I'll just show you the circular kick page. I don't want to show you too much of this guy's stuff. The different kicks, which are part of African martial arts that go back far before anyone. And you see defensive crouches that resemble the low blow. Matter of fact, I'll use this page up. Am I out of time? Yeah, I'm almost out of time. So I want you to look at this and think about how this is a variation of, or Asian martial arts are a variation of this. And only a fool would not see that I'm right about Egypt and top martial artist, the Scorpion King. Martial arts, deadly arts, horus arts, ward arts, mantu arts.